Go.
I want to talk now about, but it's not what I remember, mostly what I was told. As you know, my father before me had how much? 6 girls in the old country. If you didn't have a son, a Kaddish was a disaster. Apparently, he went to Dikler Rebbe with a kvittel me. He should wish him to have a Suche in Miriam Manya, who was before me, is almost 4 years older than me. When I was born, I was told the beginning. Everybody my sisters was sitting outside in the stoop, and my mother couldn't had difficulties giving birth. As you know, in the Ba'as, they didn't go to a hospital. They gave birth on the bed, and usually they have
midwife?
A midwife, and she used to help. And for me, I couldn't get out, so they had to call a doctor. And the girls used to always complain, my sisters, that when I was born, they were all sitting outside on the stoop because apparently they couldn't be in the house to hear, to be. They were crying, they were afraid my mother shouldn't die. And I was born with instrument. I still have a hole in my head, the size from a diamond deep, about 5 millimeter. And when I was young, I used to have cuts here and here, but this heat.
Where they pulled you out with a forceps?
Yes, apparently in there they didn't have X-rays like today. A lot of kids were born with instruments, they were born blind, or they did to them only damage. But apparently I was born and I survived. But they had my sisters always envied me, and they complained that I was the preferred son, and they called me all kinds of names, Tzaddik, Ben Yuchid, Kaddish, and I must have get all the attention from my parents, but they when I was already I guess I wasn't yet like 2 years old, because when Zahava was born after me, 20 months after me. So I guess my father was hoping for another son, but Zahava was born. My mother, they used to tell me how easy she was born. She was going up the attic, and on the way she started to give birth. It was like a cinch, and for me it was so hard, and so I was bad from the beginning. And they used to always accuse me, because in one morning when my mother was working, putting the loaves of bread in the oven in Golda, we called it then, was in a crib. Zahava was Golda. And at home she was Golda. After the war, she became Zahava because they made a Hebrew name of it. My mother was putting up the loaf and the bread in Zahava was apparently in a crib in the kitchen, and I was there too. Bertha supposed to have taken care of both of us, and they told me, I was told I went under our the stove. There was we used to use firewood, and there were ashes. So apparently I like to play, and I took ashes and I put in Zahava's eye, and Zahava was screaming, and they had to call a doctor, and they had to flush her eyes, and she survived. But this blame was always on me. I was accused all my life that I tried to blind my younger sister.
How old were you at the time?
I don't know if I was 2 or something.
You have any memory of this story?
No, this story I don't have any memory. I just remember from what I was told, later in my life. Later on, the Rabbi used to tell me, when we were already here, that they accused me for nothing. I was a baby and I wanted to play with her. Not that I wanted to blind her. I usually, we were the closest 2 children. We were called the kids because everybody was much older than us. And I used to play with her. When she started to walk, I used to take her, give her my hand and take her over the street where there was a neighbor who had children my age, but my sisters used always to resent that I went to Cheder. And in Cheder they paid a lot of money because the tuition, there was they paid for the Rebbe, wasn't like here, yeshiva. Every man who didn't succeed in business and didn't have a choice and knew how to learn bought a long table with benches and opened up a cheder, and it wasn't any supervision or listen. They had a few. If you didn't like one, you went to the other cheder. In cheder was usually after school. Before I went to school, it was all day long. But when you started school, then in the first grade was only like 3 or 4 hours, and the rest of the day was cheder. But I remember, like in my dream, that when we got what was a children's sickness, I forgot what, and we were both together in the living room, I in one crib and Zahav in the other, and they bought me a doll from celluloid, and the doll didn't have feet. And I was very frustrated. I wanted to lay down, and this doll wanted always to stand up.
It was a doll with a round bottom and a weight in it, so it would stand, and you wanted the doll to lie down.
Yeah. And another memory is one day I used to wear, I didn't wear pants, but they put on me aprons like the girls, and I resented, and I was laying down on the floor and started to kick and cry. I didn't want the apron.
How old were you?
Must have been 3. I was very young. And in another memory that I have from one day I was running, and we used to have in our corridor, our house was one side, we had a kitchen and 2 rooms, and on the other side my father's sister and Fradl with Basho and her husband Moshe had the other side. In the middle through the whole house was like a corridor.
So there were a long corridor around the whole length of the house.
The whole length of the house. From one side was the door to the street, and from the other side was the door to the backyard, to the outhouses. And I was running fast, and we didn't have like
doorknobs?
The opening for the door was handles, not doorknobs. And there was an iron big handle in the front door. And when I was running, and I ran out with my forehead in this handle, and I remember bleeding profusely. And this, I always remember I was careful not to hit any more the door. It must have been, I imagine it must have been very small, because to hit with the forehead the handle from the door, I remember this. In another thing I remember, I used to, my Aunt Fradl used to have a grocery store, and there was always a lot of sacks with flour, sugar, because it wasn't like today. Everything has to be weighed and put in bags. We didn't have bags like here, but you took a piece of newspaper and you turn around like I'll demonstrate here. You took this and you make like a bag, and you turn this. This is how they used to fill. If you bought small amount of sugar, anything, they used to make the bag from the newspaper. But in this store, they had some picture was from I don't remember, from coffee. It wasn't coffee, it was chicory, from Franca chicory. It was like a big boy, and I was always fascinated with it.
It was an advertising poster?
Yeah, a poster on the wall.
But for advertising a particular brand of chicory coffee?
Franca was the name of the coffee. But I remember, I used to like to be at the store.
Where was the store located?
In the same house. From the other side, in the front, was the store, and they had the grocery store. From the grocery store, you went into the kitchen in one room. This where my aunt used to sleep on a bed, on a folding bed in the kitchen, in her daughter with her husband, 2 children in the same room. Used to sleep in the. It was living room, bedroom was everything. So I loved to stay there as a child, to spend in this store. And I had her son was Avrum, and he left when I was very young for Antwerp, for Belgium. But I remember he used to take me and throw me up I should hit with the head in the ceiling. And Ada used to tell me he used to get a kick out when I closed my eyes every time he hit my head in the ceiling.
Did it hurt?
and I don't remember it, but Ada used to tell me this, that he used to play with me like this. Imagine I didn't have an easy time growing up with only girls, and they used to accuse me that all the 5 girls didn't make so much trouble like I myself. I guess I liked always to take a knife in chip the
table,
the bench and the table. The wood should be new. And my mother used to hit me always when I did it. Toys, I never had any toys. Just no. Anyway, when I was a little older, I didn't have any time to play. Only the free time was Saturday. But Friday, I think I told this when I was a little older, I used to take care of my uncle who lived 4 houses for us, and who was blind. And after I was finished with school in Cheder, I used to go there, make the fire, give him food.
How old is this Uncle Avraham?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was like 7, 6, because I remember I learned how to marve seder. I was still my first teacher. Later I went until the age of 10. I think it's for today it's enough. Okay.